and welcome to Soulful. All right, and we're back with the third installment of the Cornerstones Sessions. And my name is Drew, and this is Soulful. And yeah, no clever phrases or ideas coming to mind at this moment. So we shall keep it moving and pick things up right where we left them at the end of last episode by jumping into the third cornerstone here in the first half of this episode, and then we'll close up with the fourth and final cornerstone. And if you want to know more about the cornerstones as a whole, I would definitely suggest you check out the prior two episodes. I won't run through them again here. Yeah, we'll just get on with the getting on. So, cool. Third cornerstone. Here we go. So the third cornerstone is community cultivation. And the name of the game here is becoming intentional about how we spend our time and who we spend our time with. As your mama or your daddy or your grandmama or somebody probably said when you were a little nugget, be mindful about who you're hanging out with, right? Because you will take on those flavors, take on that energy. And that is definitely the case. And part of why bringing our attention to the relationships in our lives can be so helpful and so impactful. So with the third cornerstone, the first thing that I usually encourage folks to do is a relationship inventory. And it can look like a bunch of different things, but usually it's just some kind of chart, some kind of table, and you put everybody in your life on there, and then you reflect a little bit about each relationship. Right? Like, what does it give? What does it take? How do you feel when you're with that person? How do you feel after you've been hanging out with somebody? And whatever other relevant factors feel important for you. Yeah. But just taking time with each relationship in your life to take a snapshot and feel into what it's about, what it provides, what it takes. And chances are, when you're done with the relationship inventory, you will have a much clearer understanding about why your experience currently is the flavor or quality that it is. For some of us, our lives are full of folks who benefit from our presence, but maybe we don't benefit as much from their presence. And, and not judging anybody, right? Because we're not making judgments on people. We're getting curious about and reflecting upon the impact of relationships for us, for our quality, right? So people can be awesome or not awesome, but that is a separate thing from how our relationship with them affects the quality of our life, right? Hopefully that makes sense. So yeah, so when we're getting a little more intentional, a little bit more conscious about the relationships in our lives, we're not casting judgment on anybody. We're just being more conscious about how we're investing our energy, right? To then cultivate an experience that feels better or feels cooler or is more aligned with what we want to be about. Yeah, because like if you have people in your life who take a little bit more than they give, that's okay, unless everybody in your life is taking a little bit more than they give, and then you're going to have a negative balance, right? So by doing an inventory, right, and getting more conscious about how we feel and what the give and take is in our relationships, yeah, we can start to create a quality of experience that feels better, and that could be totally booting somebody out of your life, if that's how you want to do it. It could also just look like spending less time with certain folks and more time with other folks. Yeah, because usually there's a couple people in our lives that take quite a bit more than they give, or we spend time with them and feel drained after, or we feel a lot of anxiety before, so like they're not really inspiring us. They're not really filling us up. And again, this isn't a judgment on them. It's just an understanding and a recognition of the dynamic, right? And so if we see that and we recognize that and we're willing to be honest about that, we don't have to vote them off the island, right? We can do what I like to call counterbalancing, right? So if you're going to go hang out with somebody challenging that's going to drain you a little bit, then maybe you make sure to schedule some time on either side of that with some folks that are going to fill you up. Because ultimately, the more time we spend with people and in relationships that fill us up, that inspire us, that recognize and see us for who we really are, our life is going to be way cooler and we're going to be able to show up way more authentic. And so that's the goal. That's where we're hopefully moving towards as we become conscious about cultivating our community, right, and the relationships that are in our lives. All right, that feels good. I'm going to pause, check my notes. So if there's somebody in your life and you're not really sure how they might impact you or how they affect you, go on a little reconnaissance mission. Like go hang out with the person and then stalk your experience, right? Like pay attention to how you feel before, how you feel during, how you feel after, and let the data, let what you observe help guide and shape your decisions. Because, the Cornerstones are all about getting you in touch with your own experience and trusting the authority of your own experience, the authority of your own intuitive intelligence. So, same thing applies here. Just pay attention, see how it feels to be around certain folks or to be in certain settings, and then honor that. Like sometimes you might enjoy a big family barbecue, and other times you just might not have the energy for it. And there's nothing wrong with recognizing that and then honoring yourself and moving accordingly. Right? Like, don't go be miserable somewhere you don't want to be, And while this is all pretty simple, I'm also very much recognizing that this is not necessarily easy to do, right? It's not necessarily easy to start to change how people participate in our lives or how we participate in our relationships. That being said, it might be necessary if you would like to change the quality of your experience and how you feel about yourself and just how you feel, on like a regular basis. So, like anything else, the challenge is usually equal to the reward. So if you recognize, that relationship that you had a sneaking suspicion was maybe taken a little bit more than it was given, if you take a closer look at that and realize, like that's a lead weight. It's really holding you down or pulling a lot of your energy. But it's been a relationship that's been featured in your life for, years or decades. That's not an easy transition. And, I feel for you. And I've had to move and groove differently with folks similarly. But I can tell you from personal experience, being on the other side of shifting that relationship, it's provided tremendous benefit and really cool results in my life. Like some people shouldn't be starring in the movie of your life. And that's nobody's fault. Like if they're in starring roles in your life, it's going to be more of like a horror film or a really draining drama. Whereas if you move them from a starring role into a like supporting role, and then you bump somebody else into the starring role, now all of a sudden you could be in an action adventure or a comedy, right? So, I would encourage you to get creative about who you hang out with, where you invest your energy, what relationships you spend your most time in. And, and as you tweak stuff and change stuff, then notice how it impacts the quality of your experience. And then trust yourself. And that is the third cornerstone. Cool. All right. Done with the third one. And now we will bump to the fourth and final cornerstone, which is self-care and self-celebration. And so there's two concepts here, and I'll spend a little time with each. So first, self-care. So when I'm talking about investing in the fourth cornerstone in self-care, I'm talking about investing in a proactive, intentional self-care practice, which could consist of fancy spa days and massages and getting your nails did and stuff like that, but definitely includes sleeping, drinking water, how you're eating, right? Like, if you were your pet, are you taking care of your pet, right? Are you taking care of yourself? And so with an intentional, proactive self-care process, we are ideally investing in a series of behaviors throughout our days and weeks that are filling us up, filling our cup, helping us feel like our best self. And like I said, could be fancy stuff, but maybe not, but definitely is basic, like human care, if you will. And when I'm talking about self-care here, I want to differentiate it from what I call survival care, which is what most folks think self-care is. Right? Like most folks, I would say, are invested in survival care, which is when you finally have run yourself into the ground and are running on an empty tank, maybe then you do something nice for yourself, or maybe then you take a mental health day. And you do that just so you can get back to a certain level, so you can go back to surviving or showing up in your life the way that you've been showing up. For me, I'm not interested in that at all whatsoever. I'm talking about keeping your tank near or at full as often as possible by being intentional and proactive in how we invest our energy. So survival care is some bullshit. We're talking about self-care here. And we want to keep our tank full. Because when our tank is full, then we're much more awesome in a million different ways. And what I also see is that when our self-care is keeping our tank full, then we're able to show up in our investments in the other cornerstones in really cool ways too. So really your return on investment with this whole system is related to your investment in self-care specifically. Cool. So take care of yourself as if you were a pet that you were responsible for, right? And make sure that you're adequately hydrated and nourished and getting your sleep. And then also, get your nails done, get your hair did, get a massage. I love doing float tanks. I have a whole roster of self-care activities that I know fill me up, and they are in constant rotation in my life because I have learned that life is much cooler when I'm at full capacity, and a proactive self-care practice keeps me as a fuller version of myself. So, all right. So that's self-care. And, last little nugget here. You don't have to earn self-care with this system. I know for a lot of us, it can be difficult to choose ourselves. It can feel selfish, or, we have some kind of internal resistance or some noise about doing nice things for ourselves. That's cool. Part of this practice is leaning into that energy and doing it anyway. Right? So again, you don't have to earn self-care with this framework. You just do it because it's part of the framework, and then you will see the return on investment, which makes it a lot easier to keep doing it. Cool. Good. All right. Now the other part, self-celebration. So self-celebration is all about acknowledging our growth and rewarding our progress and keeping the mojo flowing. So as we invest in the cornerstones, we will notice more self-awareness, more self-compassion. We're going to start to show up in our life more authentically. We're going to start to make different moves. We might notice a pattern before it fully plays out, or we might catch a certain thought and realize that that's been holding like a whole pattern together. And so then we're free of it. Like we're going to discover a lot of cool stuff about ourselves and start to treat ourselves in really cool ways. And when we do the new stuff, we need to reinforce it. We need to reward ourselves for it. Right? And this is like brain science stuff, in addition to just a really cool reason to celebrate and party. Right? Yeah. And so self-celebration is all about reinforcing the new movements and the growth and the awareness and the compassion so that we can keep the mojo flowing and we keep the whole thing moving in a really cool direction. Again, with self-celebration, you don't need to justify it. When you recognize that you just did a cool thing, right? When you just saw yourself about to react and then you were able to hit the pause button and take a couple deep breaths, boom, bring the celebration. Because that's a huge moment. That's a huge win. And we want to get conscious about that and reinforce that to then help create new patterns of behavior. Awesome. And so self-care is a proactive all the time kind of thing, right? And then self-celebration is when we come with a little extra love and a little extra energy to acknowledge the growth moments. Cool. A lot of times self-celebration will just look like really big self-care. That's totally cool. Again, this is a flexible, creative system. So get in where you fit in, do your thing. If you want to have a really cool self-care practice that includes a massage once a month, and then you notice a really cool growth moment and you want to celebrate, so then you get a second massage, that could be cool. If you dig fancy dinners or a delicious dessert, feel free to integrate that as a celebratory reward, right? Like honor yourself, do your thing. Over time, you may discover that some of your self-care or your self-celebrations reveal themselves to be more like immediate gratification or consolation prizes, or sometimes they're just not super healthy. And that's okay. That's cool. That's part of this practice. That's part of this area, right? Is noticing what you're reaching for or what you feel like is how you want to celebrate or, how you want to take care of yourself. And chances are that your self-care and self-celebration will evolve over time as well. But don't judge it in the beginning. Do what feels good. If you notice that you don't react in a certain situation that you used to, and you want to celebrate with some ice cream, rock and roll, ain't nothing wrong with it. I'm not judging you. Maybe later you'll, want to celebrate differently. Maybe not. But that'll be your journey. And nobody needs to understand that or make sense of that. Cool. Yeah, and sometimes self-care, sometimes we will do like self-soothing and justify it as self-care, or we will act out and justify it as self-care. And again, if you're paying attention, you'll start to see that pattern. So I'm not too worried about it, but yeah, I think it's helpful to name that. Yeah. If you decide you just want to go get hammered, one Saturday night, you're like, oh, it's self-care. Okay, cool. But if you take a closer look, you might see that, maybe you were running away from a feeling or, you were doing something silly. Or maybe you just were getting hammered and having fun. I don't know. But I do know that if you pay attention and you invest in the Cornerstones as a whole system, you'll find out. And then once you recognize something is true, once it really lands as true in your own system, it's hard to ignore. So I think that's one of my favorite things about the Cornerstones is it ultimately, it's just bringing you to yourself in a way that's more informed and more compassionate. And then you get to trust yourself and then live your life according to what feels true for you. So, all right, cool. Is that I think that's it, man. I don't know. Let's check the notes. Yeah, no, we're good. Love it. All right. So those are all 4 cornerstones, all 4 areas of practice, or 2 of them here and 2 of them last episode. And we're done with that. And then, if you want to tune in for the next episode, I'm going to wrap this thing up talking a little bit about how the cornerstones work together, right? Like how the system as a whole is really cool. And maybe some other nuggets if they feel relevant. And so we will bring the Cornerstones Sessions to a conclusion in the next episode. If you would like to tune in, that would be lovely. But if not, I'll dig it. Either way, be gentle with yourself, be kind with yourself and others, be lovely, and I will see you a little further down the road. Love y'all.